Forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, in which there are no illusions, and where none can ever enter. Our holiness is yours. What can there be in us that needs forgiveness when yours is perfect? The sleep of forgetfulness is only the unwillingness to remember your forgiveness and your love. Let us not wander to temptation, for the temptation of the Son of God is not your will. And let us receive only what you have given, and accept but this into the minds which you created and which you love. Amen.
I send my love over the mountains. I send my love over the sea. I send my love into the heavens, and it returns to me.
Hello, my dear brothers and sisters. Glad to be back with you this week. We're on episode 39. We're going to be talking about the loss of certainty. And of course, we're going to be talking about A Course in Miracles. We're on the textbook, and we're in chapter 3. And this is a remake, if you will. I was not well last week, and then this week got a little bit behind. And I went back and looked at what we did, and I thought, well, I didn't really do justice for the textbook that night, and I really wanted to just kind of catch up with myself and get a little rest and come back with you to pick up where we left off in lesson 38. So let's just jump in. I want to just do things a little differently tonight, and I appreciate you kind of putting up with me. We are going to start back on the paragraph 56, which begins on page 50, and this again is chapter 3, section 7, the loss of certainty. Well, I see my words are cut off there a little bit. Let me see if I can fix that one more time. Let's try to get that to work. There we go. The loss of certainty. So I just want to kind of start out with a little bit of conversation. We're going to be getting into prayer. We're going to be talking about prayer tonight. And as you can see, the first sentence says, prayer is a way of asking for something. I just want to back up a little bit and just maybe have a quick conversation with you, just to discuss a little bit of about what we're going to be talking about tonight. I really feel like it's important to kind of backtrack on part of our foundational principles. Remember, we start with a split mind that we chose, you and I chose to say, hey, what would it be like to pretend to be God? What would it be like to be separate from God? What would it be like if you and I were to play a game of separation, where we would use our mind, our power, our thoughts, create our own thoughts, if you will, that God's thoughts are the only thoughts we've ever experienced, the only thoughts we know. In fact, we are a miracle. A miracle is a sudden shift of perception, but we are a miracle in the mind of God, because we are a thought of love. So if we can look at it that way, then we can begin to get into the textbook tonight about how prayer becomes important. As long as perception lasts, prayer has a place, and so we're going to be talking about perception versus knowing. We're also going to be talking about the separated self versus the soul, or what God created in His image. So we're going to go through it a little quicker tonight than I've been going through it in the past, but I just don't want to take a full hour. I think shorter sessions might be more productive, if you will. Will it take us longer to get through the course? I don't know. I don't know. We don't have to be in a hurry, right? Because we're not going anywhere. This is June already, June 12th, and we're still in the middle of, in the Western culture here in the United States, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and it's just weird, right? We're all kind of experiencing some weird stuff. So I had a little bit of a background image that I was going to put up, but tonight I think I'll just leave it with the coursework, and we'll just let the work do its job. See if I can get this to render properly. There we go. So we're going to do 56. Let's jump in. Prayer is a way of asking for something. Prayer is the medium of miracles, but the only meaningful prayer is for forgiveness, because those who have been forgiven have everything. I want to stop here and just simply say what we learned in the Course in Miracles, that God guarantees your sinlessness. So forgiveness, the whole concept of forgiveness, the way I've been trying to help you grasp it, and what came to me, what was given to me, is that forgiveness is moving back before we give judgment, just like a foreclosure is moving back before we closed on the house. We really kind of move back to the beginning. Before we give what? Before we give judgment. If we withhold judgment, if we withhold the thought of judgment, if we just withhold a thought, we couldn't be judging anyone unless we're actually thinking, having thoughts. So with that said, I just want to say that really is, I believe, what is so instructive about A Course in Miracles. We can begin to become to this understanding of ourselves with reason, right? Rather than with just guessing at things. Jesus is really teaching us here how we can use our intellect to break through the patterns and the loops that we play in our life on a daily basis. The reactions that we have to whatever's going on in the world, whether it's a pandemic or economic collapse, the stock market crashing, or the stock market doing well, whatever we could choose, we begin to see that these are all constructs of the mind, constructs of the ego mind. So let's jump back in. So once forgiveness has been accepted, prayer in the usual sense becomes utterly meaningless. Again, I want to interject that the use of prayer, the way I was taught, was it was beseeching, and we were asking God to bless us. I was taught that I was a sinner, and that I wasn't worthy of forgiveness. Some really strange things as I look back now, and how unreasonable that would be for a loving God to even consider me in that light. No, dreams have no effect. And really, if we're always dreaming, as Jesus tells us in the Course in Miracles, then this is just a construct of our ego mind, just a construct of ourselves. So essentially, a prayer for forgiveness is nothing more than a request that we may be able to recognize something we already have, which is God's perfect love. We could not do anything. We are as God created us, and we couldn't be doing anything that would be contrary to what God has created. We don't really have the power to change what God has created. We only have the power to imagine that we could be different, which is what a dream really is, right? In electing to perceive instead of to know, man placed himself in a position where he could resemble his Father. Remember, I said earlier, we were just pretending to be God, pretending to have a thinking mind, pretending to have thoughts of our own, a will of our own, separate from God. And he's pointing to it right there. So a man placed himself in a position where he could resemble his Father only by miraculously perceiving, because we can't really have separate thoughts. That would be impossible. We're not separate. We could never be separate from the thoughts of God. So perceiving a reality, perceiving ourselves as something other than what we could be, a pretense, if you will, is the only way that we could even begin to accomplish a game of separation, a dream of separation from God. Man, if you will, he has lost the knowledge that he himself is a miracle. Yes, you are the miracle, right? Miraculous creation was his source and also his real function. So let's go to the next paragraph, number 57. God created man in his own image and likeness is correct in meaning, but the words are open to considerable misinterpretation. Yes, no doubt, right? This is avoided, however, if image, quote unquote, is understood to mean thought and likeness, is taken as of a like quality. So thought and likeness, if we think about thinking, those are qualities, or thoughts are qualities of God, thoughts of love, which is what you are, what I am. And likeness would be spirit, or we could say, as best we can grasp it, we could say mind, right? So I'm going to run back again. This is avoided, however, if image, quote unquote, is understood to mean thought, and likeness is taken of as a like quality. So backing up, it says, God created man in his own image, or thought, and likeness, we could say, is of a like quality. God did create the soul in his own thought and of a quality like to his own. The soul, that's what you are, that's what I am. We say we have a soul, but we are the soul, right? God's child is the soul, capital S, soul. And there is nothing else. Now, this next sentence really kind of is worthy of a pause of consideration. There's nothing else. There's only God, and what God created was his perfect child, you as a soul, right? Which in his own image or thought and likeness or quality of what God is, spirit, if you will. And there is nothing else. Perception, on the other hand, is impossible without a belief in more and less. Perception at every level involves selectivity and is incapable of organization without it. In all types of perception, there is a continual process of accepting and rejecting, or organizing and reorganizing, of shifting and changing focus. Evaluation is an essential part of perception because judgments must be made for selection. So in this capacity, you can see that we are judging, or judgment, if you will, or perceptions, thoughts of perception. Paragraph 58. What happens to perceptions if there are no judgments and there is nothing but perfect equality? Perception becomes impossible. If there's perfect equality, if you and God are one, and you are an extension of what God is, a thought of love, a miracle, the miracle is love, and you are that, and we could say that that is a soul, an individuation, a thought of God, an individuated thought of love. If that's what you are, then you couldn't be separate. Ideas, as the Course in Miracles teaches us, leave not their source. You are an idea in the mind of God, and with that knowing, with that understanding, with that grasp, if we begin to grasp who and what we really are, then things really begin to change, because we begin to realize that we are the Creator in action. We are the energy of the Creator in action, and our thoughts, when they're aligned with our true self, our higher self, Holy Spirit, if you will, which is nothing more than your right mind, when we're aligned in that mind, joined in union and relationship with that self, then we are really just the vessel, or the conduit for the thoughts of God, as we are as individuated souls, as individuated miracles in the mind of God, ideas of love. Only perception involves a partial awareness. Well, let me back up. Perception becomes impossible. Truth can only be known. All of it is equally true, and knowing any part of it is to know all of it. So there is no, in perception, we're never certain. We're always full of doubt, and our perception's always changing. We're looking to gain more information so we can be more certain of our thoughts. Have you noticed? Right? But in knowing, all is all as one. If you know any part of it, he's telling us here, then you know it all. There is no possibility of misperception because there's no perception. There's only knowing. And that would be at the soul level, or, if you will, the Holy Spirit, nothing more than your right mind at the true level of who and what you are. Only perception involves partial awareness. Knowledge transcends all the laws which govern perception because partial knowledge is impossible. Again, if you know any part of knowledge, if you know any part of the truth, you really know it all. It's the absolute. And it really trips us up. It really trips me up, right? To try to come back to the absolute again and again and again, to steer my life and to join in my life. But the only way I can really accomplish it is by being joined in union with my higher self. And that's ultimately our practice, is to be the expression of love in form and field here in physical form, right? So we go through an exercise I've shared with you. I know who I am in truth. I know what I am in truth. So the who is the Christ, literally. You are the potential for the expression of Christ in form here. We could even say you are the second coming. We could also then say the what that you are then would be the manifestation of Christ in form, the manifestation of love in form. This is what our brother Jesus witnessed to us. This was his example because he actually accomplished that union in relationship with his right mind, the true self of what he was. He was the expression of God at the level of soul. No perception, only the knowing self there being expressed. Really a miracle in and of itself. A shift of perception of what he was began to be then his expression of what he is and who he is. And finally, how he served was to be that expression in field and form, the beingness of Christ consciousness. It is all one and has no separate parts. You who are really one with it need but know yourself, and your knowledge is complete. To know God's miracle is to know him. So we could say that to know God's child would be to know God's miracle. I'll read the last sentence again. To know God's miracle is to know God. So to know God's children, to know your brothers and sisters truly, to know your brothers and sisters is to know God, right? To know the essence of what they are is to know then God through your brothers and sisters, and to know yourself and to see that they are in fact one with you, a reflection of your perfection, a reflection of your Christ consciousness. Paragraph 59, forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. Forgiveness. Now, as I said earlier, if we look at forgiveness as moving back before we gave judgment, right? Moving back before we gave a thought, right? Forgiveness is the healing of the perception because thoughts are perceptions. So forgiveness is the correction, right, of perception because it's the healing of perception. Or I want to say misperception because perception is still of separation. Perception is still of this, of the mind that is still at least believing itself potentially to have accomplished something or been something separate from God or accomplished something in error. And that's where we look at, okay, well, that we were a sinner or somehow I was a sinner or whatever you want to call it. But the truth, as I said before, was that all events are neutral. That I didn't say that. I said that dreams have no effect. But those two really go together because dreaming is just an event, an imaging of events. So let me back up again and say here, correct perception of each other is necessary because minds have will to see themselves as separate. And that's our game of separation. That's what we're doing together here in this third dimensional world. Each soul, each one of us, knows God completely. We know God, we know ourselves, we know our relationship, we know everything about that relationship with God. But we've separated ourselves from that knowing in this game of separation. So that's where we begin to pretend we were thinkers. We begin to pretend we were separate. We begin to pretend that we were bodies. And we begin to then be troubled, right? Where guilt came in, that we had actually done something for real, that we had done something against God or even against ourselves and actually accomplished what we were pretending to be able to do. The fact that each one has this power completely, right? Well, let me back up. Each soul knows God completely. That is the miraculous power of the soul, is that you do know God completely because you are the child of God. You are the soul. The fact that each one has this power completely is a fact that is entirely alien to human thinking, because thinking is just perception and it's the mind of the not knowing, right? In which if anyone has everything, there is nothing left. You've heard it said over and over here, and I'm sure in your spiritual work, that you and God are one. God is all in all. You're one with all that is. God is one with all that is, and you and God are one, which means you are one with all that is. You're not separate from anything. You are a part of all that is. There could not be a two-ness if there really is a oneness, right? So here we are then, moving back from duality to semi-non-duality to non-duality, ultimately to pure non-duality, to oneness. And this is what A Course in Miracles is attempting to get us to grasp this journey. I call it like climbing the stairway to heaven, moving to what I like to call the upper room. The study that I've done with some other channeled work that's coming through, and we'll be talking about it again in spiritual alchemy as we continue forward in our learning and study together. But this is just another way of seeing this same truth, or another way of perceiving it, okay, in a corrected perception. In which if anyone has everything, there is nothing left. God's miracles, you and I, are as total as his thoughts, because they are his thoughts. You and I are the thoughts of love in the mind of God. So now this is paragraph 60, and paragraph 60 is on page 51, and this is our last paragraph that we're going to discuss tonight. So 60, as long as perception lasts, prayer has a place. Since perception rests on lack, those who perceive have not totally accepted the atonement. And we've said now the atonement is the chain of forgiveness. In our very first paragraph tonight, prayer is a way of asking for something. Prayer is the medium of miracles, but only the meaningful prayers is for forgiveness. And atonement is a chain of forgiveness, we could say, of a prayer for forgiveness, if you will. And we have not accepted that yet and given ourselves over to truth. And only truth is true. And as we've already said tonight, if you begin to really grasp it, if you have a correction of perception and you really begin to grasp the truth, then all misperception begins to fall away. And a corrected perception becomes your knowing, because you are joined in union and relationship with your higher self, with the true self, with the Holy Spirit, with nothing more than your right mind. Perception is a separated state, and a perceiver does need healing. Communion, joining together in union and relationship, communion, not prayer, is the natural state of those who know. See, if we really are in that state of mind, we can't judge anybody else, because we have stepped outside of the thinking self, the thinking mind, literally. God and his miracles are inseparable. We cannot be outside of relationship. Raj once said, you have to forgive God because you cannot be outside of relationship. It's impossible. So God and his miracles are inseparable. You are inseparable from your brothers and sisters, as I am inseparable from you. How beautiful indeed are the thoughts of God, you and I, who live in his light. How beautiful indeed are we when we know the truth of who and what we are. I know who I am in truth. I know what I am in truth. I know how I serve in truth. I am free, I am free, I am free. I'm free from fear. I'm free from the physical world. I'm free from illusion. I'm free from misperception. I'm free from guilt. I'm free from all of anything, any concept, any perception, all perceptions that could cause me to believe anything other than the fact that God and I are one, that I am one with that love. I am perfect, neither behind the point of perfection nor advancing toward it, and I must see myself therefrom. How beautiful indeed are the thoughts of God who live in his light. Your worth is beyond perception, because it is beyond doubt. Do not perceive yourself in different lights. Know yourself in the one light, where the miracle that is you is perfectly clear. And that concludes section 7, the loss of certainty. So let me just catch up with you here for a moment, and I just want to say, what say you? So if we were just considering, and this is pretty heavy stuff, right? Pretty heavy stuff. Some things we want to consider, that prayer is really ultimately a song of gratitude. Because once we really begin to know ourselves by being joined in union and relationship, the only prayer that we would have would be a connection, realizing that prayer is a connection, a dialogue, if you will, a joining of mind. In order to pray to Jesus or pray to God or pray to the Holy Spirit or whatever source you want to call it, doesn't matter the language really. Whatever you might say, that is, you're making a connection. And in my practice, as I've shared with you before, is to turn within and take a good deep breath and turn within and ask, are you there? Right? Are you there? And of course, the answer, of course, is, of course. You can't not be separate. You can't be outside of a relationship. And you're in relationship right now with your right mind, with your true self. Not in your brain, not this mind. It's outside of the body. The body is within it. Images, all images, like the dream that you have tonight, last night, or this afternoon, if you were fortunate. The dream that you have is within you, right? And the body that you have in that dream is within the mind of who you are, what you are, right? This wonderful creation, this perfect creation of God. So we can begin to see it if we look at our sleeping self and say, no, that was contained within my mind. That was a projection where I believed myself to be in it, in a body there, and separate from what I was experiencing, but all of it was within my mind, right? And all of this self is within the mind of God and the mind of the soul, or the child of God, if you will. But we're a sliver of that self, just like the sleeping self is a sliver of who we think we are, unaware that we're safe at home in bed when we are sleeping. And it's just a sliver of what we are, literally not knowing our real life. And this self is that same way, a sliver of mind, of the soul, of the beautiful, perfect intelligence that we are in God. And just that little bit of mind is what we believe we've separated off from our true self, our right mind. And of course, that's impossible. So that's where the perceiver comes in. And that's why, going back to our first discussion tonight, beginning with the split mind, if we really understand that our mind is split, right? The mind is just split in two. But it's not like 50-50. It's like almost like nothing, a drop of water compared to the ocean, right? If you imagine this personality self as that drop of water as compared to the ocean would be the all of what you are in God, really. Unimaginable what you are, right? Unimaginable what you are. So that self, that perceiving self, can begin to move then towards correction through prayer, making a connection with God, making connection with our higher self, making connection with the Holy Spirit, making connection with Jesus, making connection with nothing more than our right mind. Then we can begin to allow that mind, the thoughts of that mind, to become our thoughts, because it is you. Ultimately, we have to realize that it is us. And so beginning that dialogue is very important. And we do that as soon as we say Father or Jesus or Holy Spirit, and we're beginning the dialogue because we're making the connection. And that's a great place to be. Then we can begin to have conversation with that self and ask for guidance. It is your guidance system. And you have other guides that are available, obviously, as well. You may not think that's obvious, but it becomes obvious over time. You cannot be outside of relationship. You and all of the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the children of God, all of us are connected together. All of us are a part of the one. And it's all of us are perfect in our love of each other, which again is a beautiful thought, is it not? So then we get to the point in our last paragraph, as long as perception lasts, prayer has a place. Since perception rests on lack, those who perceive have not totally accepted the atonement and given themselves over to truth. So the entire journey that we're taking through A Course in Miracles is to ultimately is to give ourselves over to truth. But we're not going to get the small personality mind to figure it out. I'm sorry. I know that we spend most of our time idealizing how we can become perfect, idealizing how we can become more worthy, how we can become better as human beings or better in the world or more compassionate, more empathetic, whatever. And all that little mind is doing is pretending. All it's doing is misperceiving because it's doing it from a place of lack. It's doing it from a place of misperception. It's doing it from a place of separation. And it cannot even imagine. So be prepared, if you will, for a whole new experience. Be prepared for a whole new experience when you finally break through, and you will. It's impossible that you won't. But when we break through this, almost like, to me, it's almost like this crusty level of the earth at the top layer. And when we push through this and spring forth into the higher consciousness, which is what A Course in Miracles is helping us do, when we spring forth into this higher consciousness, well, my goodness, now we see things in a whole new way because we are no longer seeing or believing a lie that we could be separate at all to begin with. We're returning back to the bigger self, returning the drop of water, in literally rain, if you will, returning to the ocean, if you can imagine it that way. Know yourself in the one light, where the miracle that is you is perfectly clear. You and I are perfect, neither behind the point of perfection nor advancing toward it. And we must see ourselves therefrom. I love you, my brothers and sisters, and I thank you and appreciate you for being here with me tonight. And I hope that my session tonight has been certainly somewhat better than it was last week. I apologize for the little bit of delay. I couldn't get around to everything yesterday, and I didn't want to have another failed attempt at getting it together, so to speak, and being able to really communicate with you with a clear mind. And I got a little bit of rest today, and I've been studying A Course in Miracles this week with my beautiful beloved, and she and I are just so excited to be where we are at this point in time in our journey with you towards enlightenment, towards truth, towards awareness, ascension, and love. God bless you. Stay the course. Next week we'll be talking about section 8, judgment and the authority problem, on page 51. And we're still going to be in this book, right? We're still going to be in this version of the book. And I love you, and I really appreciate you being with me. I want to share this prayer with you again. Now, this prayer comes from A Course in Miracles, of course, and I'll just share this with you. And I just want to say again, thank you for being with me. God bless you, and we'll see you. We'll see you in our next episode. And I may put another episode out sooner than Thursday night, but that's next week. But that's my intention. And someone had asked me if I might consider doing the workbook lessons, and I'm talking to my beloved and seeing if maybe she'll begin to do that with me, because I like to have conversation back and forth. The workbook lessons are just amazing. And we're on lesson 163, I think, today. And I'm looking forward to doing some more of that. So with that said, God bless. Thanks again. And I'll see you next week.
Forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, in which there are no illusions, and where none can ever enter. Our holiness is yours. What can there be in us that needs forgiveness when yours is perfect? The sleep of forgetfulness is only the unwillingness to remember your forgiveness and your love. Let us not wander to temptation, for the temptation of the Son of God is not your will. And let us receive only what you have given, and accept but this into the minds which you created and which you love. Amen.
I send my love over the mountains. I send my love over the sea. I send my love into the